right, so just to go over the, osmoregulator and osmoconformer, all right, just so you can have those words like we're pronouncing it. Basically, we have different types of adaptations of organisms based on their situation. So the different situations are marine, freshwater, temporary water. Oh, I forgot to write the rest of water, and terrestrial. All right. So we're gonna, go through them one at a time. So marine organisms are generally, like I was saying, live in isotonic situations. That is, they don't really have to osmoregulate very much and have reasonably low energy costs. Most marine invertebrates are osmoconformers. That is, that they are living in marine environments. Now there are some organisms that live in freshwater environments. Now freshwater is a different situation because the outside solution is hypotonic. Organisms are likely to lose water. So let's look at this overhead here. All right, so if I looked at, say, for example, fish, let's look at the bottom here. This is fresh water. What is going to happen is because they are likely to lose water, they are going to have to take up, they're going to eat and drink water somewhat, but they have to try to get rid of some of that water. So they'll have large amounts of dilute urine from them. And then one of the other problems is they will not have an easy time maintaining their salt content, or their salts that they need, not necessarily sodium chloride, but calcium and magnesium and other salts. And they will take up these salt ions via the gill, and they will regulate via the gill for the other parts of the body. All right, so they're having to actively control salt uptake, so that would be like an active transport, and they would be, urinating or getting rid of a large amount of water. Now the other situation where it's super salty, that would be, in a saltwater fish that is like in a salt marsh or something. They're going to have the opposite problem where they're going to have too much salt, so they're going to have to excrete some salt ions from the gills, and they're going to drink water, but of course that's going to contain salt, so that they have to get rid of the salts and also try to maintain that water. So when they urinate, they're going to have to have small amounts of urine that they're getting rid of, and that urine will be kind of salty. And then they have some sort of osmotic loss, of course, like I was saying, through their gills. So this is kind of two basic situations. Now another situation is temporary water. This is something like a water bear or something like that, where they live like in a pond or something, and the pond dries up ephemerally. That means like temporarily. They may have a dormant period during that temporary water, and then they will go, when water is available, they will either reproduce or move around or whatever they need to do. All right, now we can talk about terrestrial organisms. Of course, terrestrial organisms are going to have a situation where they are losing water, or they will have to try to maintain their water. And some of the ways that they can do that, they have some different ways they can go about doing that. That is, they can have body coverings like exoskeleton made of chitin. They can have shells made out of calcium carbonate, skin where it's like the dead skin, the keratin that is helpful, or fur. And fur, of course, we've talked about this before a couple of times, that animals' fur act as an insulator, but also in this case would act as a barrier between the evaporative surface and the body. All right. Another thing is like behavior, using places, for example, shade or damp locations or something like that to maintain their body regulation. All right, and let's just look at this. Sorry, off my scale here. All right, so if we quickly look at this diagram is in your book. It's just comparing two terrestrial mammals, one very small and one large. Of course, the kangaroo rat is a desert animal, and the human, so it's living in conditions where it's, much drier. And a human can, temperate regions mostly. So just kind of looking at the places where they gain water, if you compare like a kangaroo rat, it's getting a lot of water from its actual metabolism. That would be hydrolysis of molecules, right? And then ingestion of food. So that's where it's getting most of its water, where we get most of our water by ingesting some kind of liquid. A fair amount of it from our food as well, but only a small amount from metabolism. Now, if you compare water loss is largely by evaporation in the kangaroo rat, which makes sense because it's in a very dry environment. Some from urine and just a small amount from feces. And if you compare that with us, we lose by evaporation, but most of our water loss is via urine. So that's just a comparison of small versus large and also climate. This one is talking about, this is an animal that has fur, a camel, and they of course live in very dry environments, and so they have a control group in terms of water loss. This is a camel where they did not clip the fur, and then when they clipped the fur, the experimental group noticed that they lost a lot more water. So this is indicating how fur is kind of a control on the evaporation of water from something like a camel. Now, just some words I forgot to mention as we're going through this. Stenohaline is a word that's used for either an osmoregulator or conformer, but mostly it's a conformer term. Where they are non-tolerant to changes in their environment. So these are organisms that would be like free, what we call pelagic fish that swim out in the ocean and are rarely in contact with different water solute concentrations. Euryhaline, though, is tolerant, so this would be something like a salmon that mostly lives in an isotonic situation, but then occasionally goes into freshwater rivers or streams. And hydrobiosis is the temporary water term, that is like water bears and such. So those are just some terms that you need to know.